our executive director pointed out, this is our second. But I just want to read what the mission of the Human Relations Commission is. The mission of the mission of the Human Relations Commission is to protect and promote the personal dignity, peace, safety, security, health, and general welfare of all people in Nashville and Davidson County. The Commission's work is organized around the theme of one city for all people. This motto guides all human relations, education, training, advocacy, and compliance services. It is with that in mind that I want to just first thank all of the commissioners who have joined us here this evening. Commissioner Burton, Vinnick, Dash, Tran, and Abafazo. Did I say that right? All right, all right, and I ran through that too. As everyone is aware, not only here locally but nationally, there's been much conversation that has been generated around race relations, equity, policing, and others. All of this has kind of come to a zenith in the last couple of years. And as Nashville is and continues to be this it city, we're trying to gather voices to speak to public safety beyond police and fire. And so we're grateful for you devoting your time to come and share. And as the executive director has pointed out, we plan on putting together a final report, because we fundamentally believe that public safety is much, much more than police and fire. And it is our intent and our goal to continue to give amplification to this, to hopefully it will ultimately impact the city's policies and some of its resources in a going forward basis. So again, we thank you for coming. I thank the commissioners, and we're going to begin with Dr. Sekou Franklin. Yes, sir. You can sit anywhere you want, Dr. Franklin.
Okay, thank you. And this is how I can move it back and forth, right? Yeah, okay.
Let her start the slideshow.
You can go to that, you can just go to that, yeah, bottom and, yeah. Okay, thank you. Greetings, my name is Dr. Sekou Franklin, and I teach at Middle Tennessee State University. I also live here in Nashville, North Nashville, District 21 specifically, and I want to thank Executive Director Mel Fowler-Green, Chairperson Davey Tucker, and the rest of the commissioners for letting me speak on this important topic. I'm going to see if I can get this the right way. So just to point out, my brief comments will focus on, just briefly, budget priorities, the need to narrate, to reconsider how police community interactions are narrated, alternatives to policing and policy interventions, all with the broader theme of reimagining public safety, or at least pushing for a reimagination of public safety. I'm going to kind of scan through some of these topics because I don't have much time. Just to point out, just a good understanding of why it's important to reimagine public safety can be drawn from the words of Alicia Garza from Black Lives Matter, who focuses on the need to shift away from heavy-duty policing and more towards quality of life issues, spending money on homelessness, drug addiction, domestic violence, spending more money, more budgets on housing and other needs for the community. And just to kind of point out why I want to talk about this is briefly just that, you know, we're really a year and a half away from the largest by the Harvard University, more specifically Eric Katrina, with some of the largest protests of the last 100 years. But locally here in Nashville, we've seen very little shift in terms of changes by the Metro Council and from the mayor's office, even though we've had some of the largest protests on the streets that we've seen in recent memory. And so just keep this in mind, that it's constantly important for us to focus on how to shift budgets towards public safety, and also how to respond to the protests on the ground. There are real demands on the streets that have not been met by Metro Council. So when we talk about reimagining public safety, We can look at the need to shift funds towards community-based resources, reallocating funds from police departments and investing in economic security programs, such as universal basic incomes or guaranteed basic income, such as public jobs, removing police officers from public schools and replacing them with social workers, counselors, public health professionals, and investing in mental health and social workers. And there's some data out there that shows that at least 25% of officer-involved shootings are a response to mental health concerns. These were demands on the street. So this is not just like theory. These were demands that one saw here in Nashville and across the country. And this is not a new concept. My previous colleague who presented here at the last hearing talked about the Kerner Commission study, in which there was a sub-study as part of the Kerner Commission report in which 40 investigators in 10 cities found that people on the ground at that time, after the New York Rebellion or New York Riot, however you want to describe it, or Detroit Riot, I'm sorry, made the argument that we needed to reinvest in communities and we needed to reimagine public safety by supporting community institutions, by supporting drug treatment centers. And even with all these demands on the street, the federal government still focused on billions of dollars focusing on policing. In fact, the largest investment in domestic programs came in between the 1960s and the 1970s through the investment of the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration that focused on policing. So even though these demands are on the street, we see very little response from public officials. Barry Weston also made this point after the Watts Rebellion or Watts Riots of 1965 in what was called the Watts Manifesto. And he said that if every policeman in the so-called ghetto behaved like an angel and were trained at the most progressive police academies, it's still not resolved policing, because at the crux of this matter are larger structural issues of a racial caste system, of poverty, of disinvestment. And in those communities that are at the apex of what I just described, those are the most heavily policed communities. So we have to look at structural conditions if we want to really resolve policing issues. And we see also some other interesting data that the amount of money towards state and local, the amount of money state and local governments have given towards policing has gone up dramatically since the 1960s, even in cases when violent crime has gone down. So if we look at all the data that we've seen, violent crime rates have not matched the amount of money towards policing. Also, we have to consider how we narrate police-community interactions, particularly from local media. And this is an interesting study that was done almost 25 or 30 years ago, and it's been updated in various studies that have found that when local media talks about police-community interactions, when local media talks about African-American and Latinx youth, then local media often focuses on this: negative images of African Americans. And what this does is that even in cases in which, or even in times in which violence is on a downward spiral, what that does is that projects a community threat, so that city leaders, Metro Council officials, the mayor's office, oftentimes will project budgets that promote a community threat, often driven by local media coverage. And here I would argue that if we really want to reimagine public safety, we need an overhaul in the public affairs and media division of the MNPD. I'm going to make a controversial argument here. This means that Don Aaron has to go. He's done too much damage in terms of promoting a community threat. And even if we look at the recent shooting in 2020 of William Johnson, some of the evidence that came out about that shooting that was promoted by Don Aaron was wrong. We can go back to the Jock Plus Clinton shooting. We can go back to the Daniel Hambrick shooting. And what the public affairs division often does in MNPD is they narrate a story before the story has actually been complete. And what that does is that is designed to corral public opinion, right, in favor of MNPD, in favor of non-investigations, not investigating. And so if we really want to reimagine public safety, we need an overhaul in the public affairs division and how they actually narrate, right, police-community interactions, because their narration and their larger kind of theme is to always project a community threat, which then also projects the need to so-called spend money on policing. There are also alternatives. We can look at the Denver program, the STAR program, which dispatches social workers and health professionals to deal with nonviolent or so-called non-serious interactions. There's the MCOT program in Austin, Texas, which is a mobile crisis outreach program that also is being looked at by advocates around the country. In Nashville, some advocates are looking at the CAHOOTS program in Oregon as a response. And again, these are programs that have a line item in the budget that allow for an alternative to policing when it comes to these particular responses. Even the Rand Corporation has produced this interesting analysis that has made the argument that these are the alternatives to policing. These are alternatives that could be used to dealing with issues other than just calling police. So what we need to do is we need to reimagine public safety. This includes shifting budget priorities in the tradition of Bayard Rustin. Some things to consider are guaranteed basic incomes, an anti-eviction displacement fund, investments in public health, investments in affordable housing. I mean, real investments in the budget, a real budget fight. We need that in this budget season. We can't run away from that. A mass expungements of persons who are eligible to be expunged, a public works and jobs program, again, in the tradition of Bayard Rustin, focusing on people having health care and dental care options, home care and child care services. If you just canvass neighborhoods in low-income and moderate-income communities, these are needs that we need to focus on in the budget other than spending money on over-policing. We need alternatives to policing, mental health alternatives, addiction, support for addiction, support for homeless and houseless services, support for restorative justice programs. Again, line item in the budgets. I strongly believe we need to overhaul the public affairs division of MNPD, and if we want to really be serious about reimagining policing, then we should focus on that. And if we don't get this, the grassroots organizations may want to consider a charter referendum and really go to the streets and really push for a major significant way in which we do budgets in the city and not focusing on policing, but focusing on communities. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Franklin. Are there any questions from the commission to Dr. Franklin? Go ahead, Commissioner Dash.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Franklin. I appreciate it. I actually have two questions, which you might be able to answer both in kind of one take. So I think the first one is regarding the public affairs program that you mentioned. What conversations, if any, have already happened with them about the messaging and narrative, just so we have some good historical context? I'll actually start with that one and then maybe move to my second question.
I don't know if any conversations have happened between community groups, but for me, I've had the privilege of, I got a mound full of open records requests that spans probably about 2,000 or 3,000 pages. I can tell you in aftermath of the Jacques Clemens case, then there were major concerns by local media folks that about information, reporting, evidence, and it was just a constant back and forth in which they were not able to get information. But the most interesting treasure trove of that information comes from actually the TBI. In Jacques Clemens case, in which the TBI investigators were very, very disturbed at MNPD and the way that they were narrating the story, the way that they were actually making a conclusion about the investigation before it was done. And that was reinforced by the Public Affairs Division, Don Aaron in particular, of MNPD. So these conversations have happened at that level, and this is all in open records requests that I'd be willing to share with the committee. I think if I can organize my notes properly, yes.
And then I think my second question, just for specifics, obviously we talked about investment in affordable housing and in public health, which is critical. What would you recommend in your position of where should we divest? So obviously divesting in policing, are there any specific programs that come to top of mind that we should divest from in order to invest in these recommendations that you've given?
I would follow the lead. I had another slide here. I would follow the lead of the proposals that the People's Budget proposed, and particularly in the 2020 budget, in which they specifically identified line item money and going towards MNPD and how that could be reallocated towards social programs. I don't have a list of MNPD programs on the surface, but MNPD, the Sheriff's Department, those are the two places where I think money could be reallocated towards these kinds of programs.
Thank you.
Mr. Frank, thank you very much for being with us today. Following up on what Commissioner Dash just said, I wonder, could you please submit to us the proposed reallocations that were proposed by the People's Budget Coalition?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. And I know that there have been some efforts in other jurisdictions, other cities, to reallocate police budgets. Can you just comment on, what's happened with those and how we can do things differently in Davidson County?
Yeah, I mean, probably the most promising effort in 2020 was in Los Angeles, in which $150 million that was typically going towards police, where I was allocated by the mayor towards other organizations. And then we saw other localities, I know in Minneapolis, that particular situation has struggled in terms of police reform as well. But we saw probably about 50 different kinds of police reform initiatives across the country and locally. A handful of those initiatives focused on shifting budget priorities, with Los Angeles being the most prominent one of them all.
Commissioner Aberfazl.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Franklin, for being here. That was really helpful. I have two quick questions. Mine stems from Commissioner Vennick's question, and this is just because I ask a lot of people this because I think it's relevant for Nashville that didn't take the moves that many other cities did last year. Many of them have reversed their positions in the last year, and I guess I would ask you, how would you respond to that reversal if that's something that comes up in the conversations here? And secondly, you talked about, Nashville's starting to feel like granite in terms of movement from the mayor and the MNPD, and things aren't shaken up as much. So you suggest an alternative to, and I think I wrote this down, a charter referendum. Is that what you said?
Well, to get a charter referendum having worked on it, is extraordinarily hard. But I think that should be on the table because there's an intransigent resistance to change in Nashville. And if I could be honest with you, the Fraternal Order of Police has so much influence in the machinations of Nashville. It's deeply embedded in the culture in terms of the influence, even though they are the beneficiaries of some of the best union benefits that one can imagine, supported, interestingly enough, by almost every single African-American city council member in the last few decades. So they get the benefits of union protection, supported by almost every single African-American lawmaker in Nashville, but they're the most resistant to change, and they exercise really extraordinarily muscular control over the climate of policing in this city. And activists over the years have constantly went to council for change, went to council for budget provisions, shot down by council, scolded by council, shamed by council, right? There's a racial dimension to that, right? Because oftentimes that level of treatment goes towards people of color and young people as well. And at the end of the day, council and city leaders are afraid to go against the Fraternal Order of Police. And then when you pair that with community threat and the idea that people are also oftentimes afraid of what goes on in the city, then it's hard to make change. And so we have to think about different ways to make change outside of the normal routine decision-making process. And it has to come from my perspective, resistance in the streets, and other ways to make change other than through those normal routines.
Dr. Tran, did you have a question?
I did. Are we out of time?
But go ahead. Go ahead.
Just real quickly, you talk about narrative and so forth, and in the other cities where things have changed, what has been the most consistent narrative that would shift things to change? Alternatively, is it people's resistance? Clearly in Minneapolis, there's the George Floyd incident, but is there any factor or trend or pattern that we can see where a shift in paradigm in terms of reallocating budgets happen? Has that been studied and a pattern occurred?
Yeah. The way I see it is that it's resistance in the streets, and a lot of median voters, if I use that word, are probably going to embrace change as long as it doesn't go too far from their perspective. But as I see it, it's been resistance in the streets, but it's not just resistance in the streets, it's the ability to sustain the resistance and to identify concrete alternatives that the average voter or average person is willing to grab onto. So oftentimes what cities are able to do is they're able to withstand the initial surge of resistance in the streets, the first 2 or 3 months of resistance, and then things settle back down, that granite that you talked about gets stiffer, stronger, and more resilient. So grassroots organizations, along with allies in the community, allies in terms of public officials, allies and from across, cross-racial coalitions, multiracial coalitions, have to be able to sustain that effort over a period of time. And that's where I think we find, if you look at all those cities across the country, I mean, probably one of the more recent examples, although it was in Cleveland. Cleveland just pushed through another charter referendum to strengthen their civilian oversight, and that comes out of what I just described.
Thank you very much, Dr. Franklin, for your time, your expertise, and just being the person that you are.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Next, we'll have Travis Claybrooks with the Rafa Institute. Thank you also for your time this evening.
Thank you for having me. Good evening. My name is Travis Claybrooks. I give leadership to Rafa Institute. We're a local nonprofit that helps communities in the urban South heal from social harm by confronting and solving its root causes. The word safe comes from the Latin word salvus. This is like our English word salve, like a healing ointment. Fundamentally, public safety is about being healthy in community. It's about not being harmed from the people or the society around us. It's freedom from both harm and the fear and anxiety that comes from the threat of harm. This evening is about reimagining how to produce public safety. We have come to grips with the truth that what we have been doing does not work. If punishment in the form of arrest, prosecution, incarceration, and surveillance produced public safety, we would be the safest nation in the history of human civilization. For we practice these things more frequently and more intensely than any nation in the history of human civilization. But we know that this is not true. That is why we are here tonight. The most profound insight I can give you is to say that we can no longer say that we do not know what to do. People around this country in cities grappling with epidemics of violence far more severe than ours are finding solutions that work. I would like to offer 3 large-scale frameworks for reimagining how to produce public safety. First, if being safe means being healthy, then thinking of harm and violence as a public health concern rather than a criminal concern makes sense. Our disease is harm and violence. It happens at rates much larger than we should expect or find acceptable, making it an epidemic, and it affects the people in our city at pandemic levels. It is a contagious disease that spreads from person to person and infects entire communities. No longer can we conceive of harm and violence as the original work of an individual. We must see it as the consequence of social determinants. According to the CDC, social determinants of health are conditions in the places where people live, learn, work, and play that affect a wide range of health and quality of life risks and outcomes. The question is, what are the social determinants that nurture harm and violence at epidemic levels, mostly in poor communities of color? And how do we disrupt those determinants? Public health approaches such as Cure Violence are model examples of this kind of preventative approach. Second, we must be radically committed to eliminating widespread economic isolation in our city. In a community where there is poverty of housing, a poverty of employment, poverty of education, a poverty of health care, there will be a bounty of harm and violence. In the same community, this deleterious dynamic is compounded by the high prevalence of alcohol retail, high interest lending establishments, poor transportation, inadequate access to high quality child care, geographic isolation, and unsupported citizens returning from incarceration. In such communities, the cradle-to-prison pipeline is predictable. However, a cradle-to-home ownership pipeline can be just as predictable if we make the commitment to invest in structures and services that are more likely to produce such an outcome. These structures and services include program-filled community centers that are in the neighborhood, high-quality early learning opportunities, neighborhood clinics, education and employability supports, home ownership programs and supports, trauma and mental health supports. The Rapid Employment and Development Initiative run by Chicago's Heartland Alliance is an example of such a program. Finally, we must transform our response to harm and violence from punishment to restoration. The greatest predictor that harm and violence will be committed is surviving harm and violence. Hurt people hurt people. When unaddressed, trauma and PTSD in the aftermath of harm increases the likelihood that more harm and violence will follow. Our current structures are not designed to help people heal and transform in the aftermath of violence. It is designed to respond to harm and violence with harm and violence. This goes beyond the intentions of well-meaning leaders. It is altogether inherent in the structures. That is how they are designed. We must replace our ethos of punishment and retribution with one of restoration and transformation. People harmed by violence need more than punishment. Simply attend a parole hearing and observe victim after victim still agonizing and hurting after 25 years of punishment inflicted on the person who harmed them. Furthermore, people who cause harm need to be held accountable for the harm they caused, and they need to be held responsible for repairing it to the greatest extent possible. They must realize the violation to human dignity they have caused, acknowledge the extent to which that harm has impacted other people, recognize that they are responsible for fixing what they broke, and discover what has driven them to such behavior and commit to a plan of transformation in such a way that they never cause that harm again. This is habilitation. This is deterrence that works. Perhaps the most powerful alternative to our current processes is restorative justice processes. Restorative justice processes gives us the option and opportunity for people who have been harmed to find healing and justice on their terms, and the people who caused harm to meaningfully account for the harm they caused. These processes force us to examine the drivers of harm and violence and the conditions for healing. When this happens, public safety increases. Over the past 3.5 years, we have been practicing restorative justice in partnership with Judge Calloway in juvenile court instead of prosecution. We have worked with cases from home burglary to homicide. We have had over 50 youth complete our process. Currently, we have less than a 2% reconviction recidivism and a 4% rearrest recidivism. Nearly 40 people who have experienced felony harms by young people have completed the process. Over 95% of them express satisfaction, healing, and justice with the process and its outcomes. We can no longer pretend that we do not know what to do. I am happy to see this inquiry into this change. I am happy to be a part of the change process. I believe that we have what it takes to produce safety. And I'll close with the encouraging words of Dr. Hildreth in fighting our COVID pandemic. We can do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again, Travis. Question, and then I'll open it up. What does restorative justice look like for adults? Just kind of a loose way of set the bar or build the box, or go ahead.
Yeah, it looks the same. I think about Common Justice up in Bronx, New York, that's been doing this for some time in severe violent cases. It looks the same. In fact, the theory is that restorative justice doesn't work as well for young people. because maybe their brains aren't developed enough to truly learn or know accountability. The idea is that it would work better in adult frameworks where people maybe have more of an ability to account. We don't find that to be true, but it looks the same. It looks like working with the person who's been harmed, understanding the needs that have been created in the aftermath of the harm, giving them an option, an opportunity to explore what meeting those needs would look like, and defining justice and repair for themselves, healing and transformation for themselves. It means surrounding the person who has caused the harm with the supports that they need in the aftermath of causing that harm, inviting them to true accountability, to explore and understand the harm that they've caused, to understand what personal transformation looks like, identifying the drivers, those social determinants around them that have made it easy for them to make the decisions that they've made, and then supporting them in processes of change, personal transformation, to the degree that they never cause that harm again.
Thank you, Mr. Claybrook. Questions from the commission? Commissioner Burton.
Hi there, thank you
Hi.
for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to ask specifically about the first thing that you would swap out or get rid of from the policing side, the way we're currently doing, and the first thing that you would instate. If you were to wave that one and it would work, what would be the first thing that you would get rid of and the first thing that you would instate?
Yeah, the first thing that I would look at is what we criminalize. A true examination of what is criminal. I think there are as a former police officer here in Nashville, MNPD, there's a lot that the law says is criminal, but it really is just people trying to survive. They're just trying to make it. Our ethos as a community is to say, you have violated our social contract, therefore we want to simply isolate you and put you away. But we know that that doesn't work, and so I would fundamentally change, and we've done it when it comes to marijuana. We've done it, and historically we've done it when it comes, as it relates to alcohol. We've simply changed what we call criminal. And if we really confronted why a person is behaving the way that they are behaving and responded appropriately to that. So I'm not one who says necessarily defund the police. I just say change what you do. That training academy can be used to train people to do a lot of things. We just simply train them to arrest people, but we could train people to do lots of things. Those vehicles can be used to do lots of things. We use them to put people in the back and take them to jail, but we could use those vehicles for lots of things, right? So I say just change the industry, change what we practice.
Thank you. Commissioner Vinnick.
Mr. Claybrook, thanks for being with us today. So 2 questions related and somewhat. So you've been working primarily in the juvenile justice area. What things are holding your efforts back to expand what you do on the juvenile justice side? And what would need to happen in Metro to expand what you're doing in the juvenile justice side on the adult justice side?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the benefit of what's happening in Davidson County is that we have system leaders that are leaning in this space. Judge Calloway is leaning towards this space. Glenn Funk is leaning towards this space. Martisha Johnson is leaning towards this space. Our police department is leaning towards this space. As we coalesce with other jurisdictions from around the country, their system leaders are not as friendly as ours are here. However, there's still some elbow grease and pushing that we have to do. I think as we continue to have success, our leaders need to be invited to continue to be more courageous. Continue to be more courageous in thinking about restorative justice as an option, for example, in more serious cases, right? we currently have a homicide case, but what would it look like if every case were at least available to a restorative justice process? If people had the knowledge that it's there, and if they wanted to choose that they could choose that as a process. I think it takes courage to try it in the adult system. There's some practical considerations in terms of, you know, where do you insert a restorative justice process in the traditional legal process? You know, do you at what point in the pre-prosecution space do you do it? Are there some case types that may need to be pre-adjudication but post-prosecution? Are there some other case types that need to be deeper in the system? Where can we inject restorative justice processes at the pre-arrest phase? I would love to see a 711 number where citizens or police officers could call and say, I think this is more fitting for a restorative justice process than arresting this person and taking them to jail. So it really is changing a mindset, and not to be trite, but I really think it's a marketing and communications thing. Here's something that works. Let's put it into the public consciousness more so that people see it as something that's normal.
Just one follow-up. To your understanding of how things are currently structured, is there discretion within the juvenile justice system and the adult justice system to do the things you're suggesting, absent state intervention?
Oh yeah, it's a choice. This is not a legal policy question. This is choosing to practice a thing. There is discretion among judges. There's discretion from the DA to do it. So it's just a matter of will, courage. And I think, in all fairness, I think it is having organizations that can be trusted to do the processes well, to execute them with integrity, to get the kind of impact and outcome that we as a community want, right? So it's both of those things. There's a bit of responsibility on all parts.
Any other questions? Thank
Come
you.
on, Miriam. I see you looking over there. I see you looking over there. You had the head tilted, the eye curved. You're like, wait a minute, what are you talking about?
Really fast, okay, fine. I'm thinking about what you and Dr. Franklin said, which was really emphasizing this public relations part of the whole thing, marketing, communications, public affairs. It's really interesting that that's what it's coming down to in both of your minds. So I'm scanning over local news, thinking about when was the last time I heard about a successful restorative justice event, showing the face of a young man and showing him being held to account and smiling because he's got a different option for his future.
Yeah, we got a bunch. But this is why I said this. I think the single greatest thing that I could offer is to say that we can no longer say that we don't know what to do. I think what is ratcheting our minds is that for so long we have been doing it a way. And sometimes it's so hard. We know it doesn't work. We know it doesn't work, but we've never really seen what could work. We haven't had a vision. It's just like a person who is, I grew up in North Nashville, who comes from a particular community, a particular framework. Sometimes you can't imagine a different future because you've never seen it. And I think our city is there. We can't imagine a different future because sometimes we haven't seen it. And so sometimes the greatest thing is just to show the people, here's a possibility, here's what it looks like. And then I think suddenly people are like, yes. Because that's a part of safety, knowing that I'm standing on this rock. Can I trust that next rock? Can I trust that next rock? And my answer to that is yes. You can trust it. Let's try it. We can do this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Darkenya Waller with the Legal Aid Society of Middle Tennessee.
It's still working. Make sure it's still working. Yeah, I think we're good.
Welcome back, Ms. Waller.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Darkenia Waller, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director of the Legal Aid Society of Middle Tennessee and the Cumberlands. LAS, as we call it, is Tennessee's largest nonprofit law firm, and the 13th largest law firm in the Nashville MSA. With 45 staff attorneys across our 48-county service area, we offer free civil legal services to low-income and vulnerable people. Craig Haney, a professor of psychology at the University of California at Santa Cruz, recently released a new book called Criminality in Context, the Psychological Foundations of Criminal Justice Reform. The book is a comprehensive, in-depth analysis of 40 years of research into the root causes of criminal behavior. In the book, he states, and I quote, "Addressing the terrible consequences of poverty and economic inequality is important in its own right, but also should be seen as advancing the goal of crime prevention. Reducing crime and poverty are part of the same social justice agenda," end quote. If social, economic, and racial injustices are the real causes of criminal behavior, Haney argues, then the only real path to reducing crime is to meaningfully target social, economic, and racial injustice. It is from this lens that I posit with the Commission that the only way to meaningfully address crime is to address poverty. My further comments here today will address how poverty or potential poverty shows up in our communities and how meaningful legal services can help address it. Meaningful civil legal services can reduce adverse childhood experiences, economic instability, and mental health stressors that often lead to crime. In my remarks, I will be referencing a 2017 report from the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness to further show the benefit of civil legal services in preventing poverty and thereby crime. Poverty shows up in housing and the risk of homelessness. Connecting individuals with attorneys at the earliest possible time may prevent homelessness in some instances. Lawyers may also be able to shorten an individual's or family's length of stay in a shelter system by removing barriers to otherwise available housing options, thereby curbing the snowball effects of poverty from homelessness. I commend Judge Linda Jones and the Davidson County General Sessions Court for their efforts to address this issue with the homeless court, but the ideal solution would be to prevent the eviction or the homelessness in the first place. Civil legal services and a right to an attorney in housing cases can help with that. Poverty shows up in domestic violence. Lawyers can help people experiencing physical, sexual, or emotional abuse by securing state intervention, a civil order of protection, child support, emancipation, or by helping a grandparent or other caregiver secure custody or legal guardianship in order to access benefits for which they may be eligible. Identification. Loss or revoked identification can cause loss of employment or employment opportunities. A lawyer can help obtain a replacement Social Security card, driver's license, U.S. passport, or state birth certificate. Legal service providers might also help navigate a relicensing hearing, making it possible to restore a revoked or suspended driver's license, which is often necessary to obtain stable employment, especially for those who may be formerly incarcerated. Reentry services. The collateral consequences of justice system involvement can also impact the ability to obtain meaningful employment. Lawyers can help by addressing outstanding warrants, fines, fees, and court costs. Legal service providers can help mitigate the impact of criminal records by correcting errors and obtaining expungements, seals, or even pardons for eligible individuals to break down the barriers to housing, employment, education, and other mainstream resources needed to escape poverty. Public benefits. Lawyers can offer assistance in identifying and enrolling or appealing erroneous denials in assistance programs such as Medicaid, SSI, TANF, SNAP benefits, or housing assistance programs. Support of alternatives to criminalization. Legal services providers can help communities develop and provide alternatives to criminalization by educating the community on constructive alternative policies and practices that put people on a path to stabilization. Legal services providers can also support alternatives to criminalization by reviewing program policies and providing legal guidance on how to advance a comprehensive and seamless system of care that combines behavioral health and social services, supports collaborating with law enforcement and behavioral health and social service providers, and promoting alternative justice system strategies. The list could go on to addressing child custody and placement, identity theft, military benefits, access to education, IEPs, 504 plans. Lawyers can also ensure that the new laws and policies address the needs of individuals and families. So what policies, practices, and investments should be made to help address poverty as a part of a comprehensive crime prevention strategy? Glad you asked. There should be constant coordination between case management providers and civil legal aid. This is critical in order to facilitate the identification of legal issues when they arise, to help vulnerable populations secure basic necessities such as health care, housing, government benefits, employment, and educational services. Financial support should be made available to nonprofit service providers to retain legal counsel, to serve on staff, and provide legal services. In order for people in poverty or heading toward poverty to quickly get back on a path to stability and self-sufficiency that will advance their economic opportunity, they need access to the tools that will reduce their legal barriers. Legal service providers can play an essential role in removing such barriers, helping to further accelerate progress toward preventing and ending abject poverty and crime in Davidson County and beyond. Specifically, that looks like an attorney designated through LAS to work with the YWCA and its domestic violence victims, an attorney to work with the Nashville Rescue Mission and its residents, an attorney to work with Dismiss House and its residents, an attorney to work with Turk and its clients. LAS offers an infrastructure to coordinate and regulate these services countywide in an effort to reduce poverty and crime. I would commend the Commission to advocate for investment in these services. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Waller. Questions from the Commission? Go ahead.
Ms. Waller, thank you so much for being here again.
Absolutely.
Has the Legal Aid Society been able to quantify the FTEs that would be required to fill in the gaps that you've identified in your statement? In other words, I'm aware that the Legal Aid Society has its own staff, and I'm aware of the pro bono program. You're obviously talking about a much more organized and aggressive mechanism to sort of meet those needs. What are we talking about?
Unlimited.
Well, obviously it can't be unlimited.
Unlimited. I don't know that I have a number per se. I mean, certainly something that we can work on for you, but I don't know that I have a number per se that would, solve, the issue in Davidson County. But it certainly involves, the availability of those services for those key programs that may be identified by the Commission or by, government to be most effective in our community. So whether that's, some of the programs that we've heard from here today or will hear from, whatever those programs that, most directly impact public safety, that would be where we would place it.
Okay. And two just to follow up if I can.
Go ahead.
I think you made mention in your remarks about the access to civil attorneys as we provide access to public defenders funded through the city. Is that an operative program any place in the country that you're aware of?
Absolutely.
And where is that?
There are a few programs. Most notably is in New York City, where there is an absolute right to counsel for persons who are facing eviction, recognizing, of course, the imbalance between oftentimes tenants who have little or no education around their legal rights in court and owners, landlords, who typically, and not always, but typically have more resources to represent themselves. There are other jurisdictions that have passed a right to counsel, but I do distinguish a right to counsel from universal representation, which is where we'd like to provide an attorney for everyone, which is not necessarily a right. You have a right to an attorney if you cannot afford one when you are being charged with a crime. And if you can't afford one, one will be appointed to you. That, as you know, does not exist on the civil side.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Abafazo.
I don't even have to raise my hand anymore. Thank you so much for coming back and talking about a whole new set of issues, so I appreciate that. The thing that stood out to me was an attorney at the rescue mission, for instance. Has that happened in Nashville, and what does that look like?
To my
Seems
knowledge,
very powerful.
Yeah, to my knowledge, it hasn't. And I will tell you, on an individual basis, you know, where we're able, our organization does form relationships with organizations to try and provide legal services. But those organizations are doing so on their limited budgets, trying to make room for this service that they know exists, but are unable to afford in the way it's needed. But to my knowledge, no, we have not done so directly. But we are always seeking opportunities to do that. We actually do have a relationship with Dismiss House, again, for a partial representation, and we work with those residents there to help clear records, to help, you know, get certificates of employability, all of the things that are necessary for people to effectively reenter society after incarceration. But again, it's something that's needed. And most organizations that are doing the work in our community struggle to provide.
Commissioner Tran.
It's great seeing you again. And I just wanted to, your portion is a nice follow-up with Mr. Claybrook's presentation, in the sense that we seem to be criminalizing poverty. And one of the things that happened is that, I think implicit in your presentation, there's two parts to it: how we prevent poverty. But then when we criminalize people for their poverty, they get stuck in the legal system, in the system that bogs them down. In other words,
For sure.
fees and so forth. And what you're implicitly saying is that your legal aid is to help them disentangle themselves from that criminalization process so that they can be stable and self-sufficient to carry on with their own lives as they wish. And I just wanted to make sure that I understand that correctly, because
that is
you're implicitly,
yeah.
your two parts of your presentation are saying that, but I just want to make that evident.
You are correct, and I appreciate you for bringing attention to that. And this is a 2019 set of figures, but I was doing some research and read where in Nashville from January to October of 2019, and this was pre-homeless court, but still from January to October of 2019, 464 people experiencing homelessness were arrested for criminal trespassing, according to the Metro Nashville Police Department. Many of them got arrested on this charge more than once, making it a total of 724 arrests. That's an average of 2.6 arrests per day over a span of 273 days. In that same period, 37 people experiencing homelessness were charged with obstruction of a passageway. There's a better way. There's a better way.
Commissioner Dash.
Great to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Just, you know, taking what Mr. Claybrooks had shared earlier, you know, I think that a lot of naysayers say that legal services is more transactional and not transformational, and we sometimes hear that out. And so I guess the question I have is, where do you see restorative justice playing a role in, you know, what Legal Aid Society is doing and this investment into legal services?
Well, the entire idea of restorative justice is that it's pretty much outside of the legal system or our current legal system. It's the idea of providing alternatives that prevent people even from the point that a charge is made, that there's a possibility that something could occur that there's not even a charge on the record. You know, if you're, you know, restorative and even preventative, and those are two different things, but restorative and preventative efforts are, you know, the things that legal aid does every day, which is to try and address an issue before it becomes an actual issue. Our most beneficial work is when we catch things before the snowball. The unfortunate thing is the majority of our cases is when people have gotten to the point that everything has snowballed to a point that they literally can't get out of the hole. There's just no way to do it without a voice that knows how to navigate it, as well as the credibility to navigate it. Kind of that scenario of somebody screaming at the top of their lungs, but until the lawyer shows up, no one listens. So.
That's helpful, thank you.
Ms. Waller, again, thank you for coming back. I was rather intrigued also when you started naming organizations that would benefit from your representation. And what about schools?
Absolutely, absolutely. That applies absolutely in schools, and that's something that we do as well. We have a unit called our Gilbert Family Fellows, and their specific work is to work with those children who tend to be marginalized in school communities, with an effort particularly towards what may appear to be racial discrimination in terms of suspensions and expulsions, as well as those who have different abilities and need specific plans in order to have those differences in their education style addressed. And so we have attorneys who specifically work to navigate IEPs for perhaps parents who may not be able to navigate getting the services their children need, as well as, like I said, those children who may be getting suspended or expelled when it's unknown, when people don't realize that that person may very well have a disability that's impacting behavior.
It's interesting that you say that. I'm going to say one last thing and I'm done. It's so a parent whose child maybe has been expelled and the parent doesn't think it's right, or the parent thinks that the child needs something that the school should be providing that they're not. Legal aid is available.
Absolutely.
So, because this is new to me, and I mean, I'm kind
I don't think people really realize the breadth of what we do.
Exactly. But then if people knew that, I think they would use that to where you would need more folks to do that. So currently now, how many folk do you have, attorneys that just focus primarily on civil legal issues resulting around a child being in school?
We have approximately 8 attorneys who work on this issue. They work on other issues as well, but we have approximately 8 attorneys who work on school issues, suspensions, expulsions, primarily focused on those with minorities.
We need a PSA for that. That needs to go on public television. That is
The reason I'm here.
But I say that as a preacher, and we get called to go to court. We go over to Branchford. We get called to go everywhere, and we just show up, and we don't know nothing other than somebody wanted us to be there with them. But that's amazing that, and as you were talking, I was just filtering that through my mind of just how impactful that would be just on the side of the Board of Education, knowing that some of the families that I think they treat the way they treat just because they can't treat them that way.
Exactly.
How that would really change some things. So
And we recognized that. I think this program has been in place since 2017, maybe 14 or 17. I honestly have to look back at it, but it's been in place for a while, and We see the issues, we recognize the issues then, that parents were having trouble navigating and advocating for themselves. They don't know the right words, they don't know, the right rules, they don't know what they're entitled to. And so we made a decision to get involved in that space to be of assistance to those families. But as has been stated, marketing, it's always our constant challenge to express to people what we do.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you again, and I'm guessing next time we have something, we'll just invite you back again.
We probably cover it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Michael Randolph and Amanda Brack from the Mental Health Cooperative. And Michael, if you hit your little, okay, she's coming to help you there. All right.
Great. Thank you very much. My name is Amanda Brack, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon on this very important topic. In addition to being a licensed clinical social worker, I'm currently the Senior Vice President of Public Relations and Community Development for the Mental Health Cooperative. Prior to this role, I was over all of our clinical lines of business, our clinical services, and I've really had the pleasure of working in Nashville mental health for the past 24 years. Pleased to introduce my colleague, Michael Randolph. Michael is a licensed practical counselor. He is also the program manager for our new Partners in Care or co-response program with the Metro Police. He has worked in the field of Nashville and crisis mental health services for the past 14 years. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Mental Health Cooperative, we are a non-for-profit mental health agency that was founded in 1993. And we were founded to really specialize in serving the most severely and persistently mentally ill individuals in our city who were falling through the cracks in the traditional system. We now have 10 locations throughout Middle and East Tennessee and have the pleasure of serving over 14,000 consumers in all of our various locations. Our mission at the Mental Health Cooperative is to engage, enlighten, and empower individuals and families with behavioral health issues to live healthier lives. And the way we do this is we really work on a team-based model with care managers. Care managers are addressing those social determinants of health issues that Mr. Claybrooks and Dr. Franklin mentioned in their presentations. Because the individuals we serve not only are dealing with the effects of their serious and persistent mental illness, but they're often living at poverty or below. They need assistance in maintaining some basic necessities: stable housing, access to transportation, navigating a complex transportation system, accessing health care, and getting all of their health care needs met, not just their behavioral health care needs. Our care manager's job is to work alongside their clients, or as we call them, their consumers, to make sure that they are getting those needed services. In addition to our traditional outpatient services, we also offer a full continuum of crisis services. We call it emergency psychiatric services. Most people call it crisis services. This includes our 24/7 mobile crisis response team, a crisis treatment center, which is a 24/7 operation where individuals can walk in and get an immediate mental health assessment if they're experiencing an acute psychiatric issue. We have a 15-bed crisis stabilization unit where, again, individuals who have immediate needs for stabilization can get treatment. The length of stay there is typically 2 to 3 days. We have an 8-bed respite program that helps individuals, again, can stay overnight to help stabilize more of the psychosocial stressors that they may be experiencing. And I think it's important to note the individuals that we're seeing are people who are experiencing some of the most devastating effects of mental illness and stress. They're actively suicidal. They are dealing with issues related to psychosis often, where they're acutely paranoid. They're seeing and hearing things that other people don't see and hear. They're also dealing with the effects of substance abuse. We are seeing an increasing number of people who are psychotic as a result of substance abuse in our city. I think it's important for you to know in 2020, our mobile crisis team conducted 8,755 assessments. And again, those are people who are having the most acute need at the time. Our crisis treatment center provided stabilization services to 2,544 individuals. And when I say stabilization services, what I mean is that they're meeting with a master's level mental health clinician who's assessing that current need. Then they are also seeing a psychiatric nurse, a nurse practitioner, or a psychiatrist who's doing a full evaluation. We can start them on medication if need be. And they're also attending group treatment. We have peer support individuals, so individuals with lived experience who are often able to engage folks more effectively when they're going through their crisis by sharing their own experience of recovery and resiliency. The newest part of our crisis continuum is what Michael is overseeing, the daily operations. It's our Partners in Care program with Metro PD. This is a pilot project to address the most acute needs where people are calling 911 because they themselves or their loved one is experiencing a psychiatric emergency. We developed Partners in Care, and I first want to say it's truly a partnership. It has to be a partnership with mental health and law enforcement in the city to make this successful. But we started in June of this year with 16 officers who volunteered out of North and Hermitage Precinct, then 6 of our master's level licensed counselors who chose to be part of this project where the counselor rides along with the specially trained officers to take those mental health calls in their sector. In addition to going on the mental health related calls, that clinician is also there on other calls for service that officer may be going on. It could be a burglary call. The clinician is there, the officer is doing their job, but then the clinician picks up on the fact that that person may have a mental health issue or an acute trauma reaction, and they can intervene in that way. Since we started, and again at the end of June, there's been 542 events that these teams have responded to. In a handout that you all received earlier, hopefully you will see some of the data from these various programs I've talked about. It is really our hope that this program will continue to provide a valuable resource for our city and will expand to other jurisdictions. Dr. Franklin mentioned Denver in his presentation in their STAR program. We actually modeled our program after Denver when we were working with Metro PD on ways to do mental health response differently. Michael, Inspector Imhoff, and others called around to other jurisdictions, and we landed with Denver because Denver had developed a crisis intervention team first, many years ago. That is an officer-led program. It's a program that's been around for many years. Then they evolved to a co-response model, just like we are doing now with the clinician riding with the officer. And then most recently, they have developed their STAR program, which is where on those cases where you may not need an officer, you have a clinician and an EMT who respond and de-escalate that situation. We chose Denver because we really liked their evolution in their program. They had changed to meet the needs of their city, and their city is comparable size to Nashville. The questions that were sent over to us earlier, I want to make sure I highlight the first one is, based on my professional experience or our experience, Michael and I have talked about this, what does public safety mean? In my experience, it really means the implementation of programs, policies, and practices that ensure the protection of citizens across the city. So how do we do that? We have to think past just the physical well-being of those individuals. But as a clinician, I was taught about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and many of y'all may have heard that. Maslow really stressed the importance of, it's not only about physical safety, but it's the security in your health, your finances, your feeling of belonging, job security, and a sense of family. Those are critical hierarchy of needs that we have to address, as the other speakers so eloquently talked about, to move towards a true public safety model in our city. We also have to recognize the impact of trauma, and I think the programs with which we've been working hard to develop are addressing many of those trauma issues. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Dash.
I have a few completely unrelated, like the questions don't link in any way, shape, or form, so please forgive me. But the first question I was going to ask of like the 627 walk-ins, if you could give us, I guess my question is sort of just like, what's the breakdown maybe ethnically? Is it mostly minority communities? And then I think the other question that I have is, do you all have any resources for language access? Like if someone who walks in speaks Spanish, you know, what is the resources that you all have in those situations?
Great. In terms of the breakdown, I don't know that off the top of my head. It's really, last time I looked at it in the health department, we're sending data to them so that they can distribute more information about that. It's pretty evenly across the board in terms of the racial makeup. For languages, and Michael can chime in too, we do have some individuals on our staff who are Spanish speaking, so that is an assistance, and then we also have to use the language line.
Yeah, we contract with them, and they have translators for many different languages, and we are able to set up a conference call and then get in the same room, and then still do a face-to-face evaluator with like a virtual translator right there.
And then my second question is, at the beginning of your presentation, you sort of really talked about transportation and how that can be impactful on mental health. And so, you know, what impact would a functional public transit system have on, you know, the community members that you all reach out to? I would just love to, if you could kind of connect the dots for us on how that could make the city more safe.
Absolutely. So for the population we serve is, you know, getting to their basic health care keeps them stable. And that will decrease the likelihood of situations with which, you know, first responders may be called to address an outburst that they may have had. And transportation, it's complex in our city. Almost, I mean, majority of our clients who we serve out of our Nashville office rely on the public bus system in our city. And I have to commend them for being able to do that. When I hear their stories about transferring 3 or 4 buses just to go a 12-mile distance, that's very complicated. And the fact that many of these individuals, they suffer from schizophrenia. So that the ability to focus in a large setting and get on our bus system and do that while they may also have children in tow is incredibly difficult. I think if we really invest in improving that, we will see higher rates of people taking care of not only their mental health needs and getting to those mental health appointments, but also their primary health care needs, which I think makes us all a healthier community. And I will just say this, one of the things that is so vitally important to us as an agency, and we have to really work with our staff, is if our consumers are late for their appointment, you don't say you're late, you're an hour, you have to come back. It's, we're glad you made it here. Because of those challenges they may have just walking in the door and getting there. Hope that answers.
It did. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Burton.
Thank you very much for being here. My colleague asked a couple of the questions that I was going to ask. However, I did want to know what kind of training does your staff get with regard to intercultural competency and working with communities of color and immigrant communities? That would be my first question. And my second question is, how, if there is a situation with a person who has been diagnosed or suspected of being mentally ill, how does the police department or the sheriff's department interact with you? Do you get calls for that? So the first one is about the training for your staff.
Training for staff is definitely ongoing. A lot of our clinicians are licensed, and you know, our ethics of our licensures, you know, requires cultural competency. So we do require that of our staff to keep up. We have internal trainings as well in our internal training software, and we also get guest speakers to come out for in-services, which we did much more regularly before COVID.
We also, I think it's important to note that our staff got trained, but when we did the additional training for officers who were part of the Partners in Care program, we also had guest speakers come from Catholic Charities for one, but that was a while ago.
A variety. Catholic Charities, Lipscomb University, I think NAMI came out, a variety of guest speakers to really hit that issue head on and really, you know, over-train or hopefully train in cultural competency.
And as Michael said, I think that's an ongoing area, and as our city and the makeup of our city changes, that is definitely an ongoing area of focus for our training.
Okay.
In regards to when Metro, I believe your question was if Metro PD interact with somebody who they think has schizophrenia, you know, based on their training, if they identify that there's a mental illness, their directive is to call us, our crisis line. I will say we're seeing those calls go up, which I'm very grateful for. I think that is in large part due to better emphasis on training with Metro PD. They've always gotten training, but I think it's a greater awareness. And I think the work we've done with the Partners in Care program has, in a way, marketed outside of the two pilot areas of Hermitage and North, because we've seen the numbers of police-initiated calls go up across all of the county.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Vinnick.
Appreciate all the work that the Mental Health Cooperative does. Just a couple of questions. Dr. Franklin mentioned both the CAHOOTS program and the STARS program. My question to you is, does the Mental Health Cooperative have the capacity to run both a Partners in Care program and a CAHOOTS STARS type program at the same time?
Thank you for that question, and it's a very good question. I will say that I think if we had enough time to properly plan, because to getting something off the ground, our Partners in Care program, we had a pretty quick turnaround. If we go to expand that as well as get a CAHOOT-style program off the ground, we definitely need time to properly plan and make sure that both programs have the infrastructure they need to be successful. So the short answer is yes, but in terms of a timeline, it needs to be a very realistic timeline. And at this point, I couldn't tell you exactly what that timeline looks like because we would have to certainly work on training for our workforce.
So you don't know, for instance, if that would not be something that could be put into place next budget cycle?
That would be a challenge. I'm not going to say no. I hate saying no, but that would be definitely a challenge. It would need a lot of resources to get it ready to actually go live with response in the next budget cycle.
You also mentioned in your presentation that you have a mobile crisis team. Can you tell us a little about the staffing of that mobile crisis team and how that mobile crisis team differs from the Partners in Care?
Sure. The mobile crisis team has been around since our agency started in the early 90s, and we are the designated mobile crisis provider by the Department of Mental Health. So the Tennessee Department of Mental Health designates a crisis provider for each county in our state. We happen to have the contract for Davidson County. It is, in the majority of the funding, almost all of the funding comes from state dollars for that. It is staffed with bachelor's level clinicians who are answering the 24/7 hotline. So they're the ones getting the call, getting information about what's going on with the caller and determining, does this need a face-to-face assessment or does this person need linkage to other resources? If they do need a face-to-face assessment, then we send out a master's level mental health clinician. Majority of those calls, as part of being a crisis team, we're also a pre-screener for the teen care members and the state hospital. So over the last few years, a majority of those calls that we get where we have to respond are in emergency rooms because we're pre-screening for people who may need to go to the state hospital or they're a teen care recipient. So that mobile piece has been hampered quite a bit by the sheer volume because people are driving to the emergency rooms, and that's where we're going the majority of the time. We do go into the community, but most of the time when we're in the community, it's law enforcement has called us for assistance or law enforcement meet us at the scene.
So I'm just trying to clarify. So is it fair to say that the mobile crisis team response is more generated by the individual themselves, whereas the Partners in Care is something where somebody reports? I'm just trying to distinguish between the two.
It's both. And the Partners in Care, it could be that person who's called 911 and says, I'm suicidal, I have a knife, I'm threatening to kill myself. But most often than not, it's a family member who's called on behalf of that person. Or they're concerned because their loved one is very paranoid and is acting erratically and irrationally. We get some of those calls too on the crisis line. It's just the crisis line, that often is people like emergency hospitals who are calling us to say, look, I've got these patients in my ER that need to be seen by mobile crisis. About 80% of the calls that come to the mobile crisis line are coming from hospitals.
Okay. And just to sort of go back, so taking the first example, somebody calls and says, I'm feeling suicidal, I have a knife. Mm-hmm. Is that a situation where a master's level person would go out and see that person?
It depends. If we know that person. If we don't know that person, 9 times out of 10, we're going to ask law enforcement to meet us there if they're not already on the scene.
Okay, thank you.
One question. I have one question, because I was baffled by the incident that occurred with a young man in mental crisis in Brentwood. that took several hours, and there was a partner in care there, or there was a mental health provider there, but was not allowed for several hours. Well, they were never allowed to engage the individual. And a shot goes off in the dark, and then a bunch of other shots go off, and then the person is dead. Partners in care, as I look, it's primarily MMPD dictated, in the sense that they tell you when you can and when you can't, and they basically outline the parameters in which you will operate. And I'm asking that purposely to ask you, if you were doing partners in crime, partners in care, I would definitely hope that that's not a Freudian slip.
That is not a program.
But if you were doing partners in care, how might it look different? Because it was just unfathomable for me at times for several hours to go on and no one with the expertise engaged a person whose family had an ongoing history that had been documented. Even the 911 call seemed to outline it a certain way. So I guess, is there something you would do different?
Let me first say, I'm familiar with the call you're talking about, and I can't talk about a specific call. That was not a Partners in Care, though, I will say. That was a call that went out to Metro PD, and they had to call out their negotiator team. And there was a mental health person on site, and was someone who was advising the negotiator who had developed, who had been able to engage the individual on the phone call. Again, I can't go into the details of that other than what I've just stated, but there was a mental health person there who was actively involved in that scenario. On the second part, how would we, in regards to Partners in Care being police-led, the true Partners in Care program that has now since developed since that time, it is truly collaborative, where the officer, sure, if it's an immediate danger, they are, kind of taking the lead. But a majority of these calls, it is collaborative with the mental health clinician. The mental health clinician is, while they're en route to that call, is going, look, I've looked up Johnny. We've seen Johnny before. Here's what we need to know, and here's the approach we need to take. Again, Michael rides in those calls.
When situations with weapons are involved, generally with the Partners in Care program, the police are in charge of our safety. And one thing that we had to train the counselors on is, it's our instinct as helpers, as professionals, as counselors to get close to somebody, kneel down, try to get really close to talk to them. With an officer watching our safety, especially if an armed individual, we don't want to inadvertently cause an unsafe situation for that consumer. So with situations with weapons, it becomes very complex, where the police pretty much make the call of the safety. We had an example with a man who was schizophrenic and delusional, and he was holding a man at knife point. The officer took lead in de-escalating the situation. The officer was one of our officers, specially trained, and was able to get that individual to come out, and we immediately got him a mental health assessment there. He did not have any charges pressed against him. We were able to get him emergency psychiatric care. That situation is a situation where the partnership is working well, where the safety of the community, the individual, and the counselor is a responsibility of the police officer, and navigating the complex mental health system and getting that person immediate care and kind of jumping over some of those hurdles that exist normally is the counselor's responsibility, in developing that rapport when needed.
Okay, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
It's okay.
I did not mean to put you on the spot, because you really didn't get at the heart of what my question was, but that's okay. Secondly, I would ask you, would it be beneficial if all of MMPD got the special training?
I think it's a great question. And when it comes to Partners in Care, I had a lot of lateral of creating what this looks like in the field. But when it comes to issues, to answer your question before, is issues of safety is the police officer's call. They decide when it's safe for the counselor to talk to somebody, or when we need to stay in the car until they make sure the scene is safe, to answer that question. I would say there are pros and cons to getting every officer trained. I don't think every police officer needs to respond to these types of calls. But I think I don't want the officers who do great work in these kind of calls to get burned out. I want to be able to have some options for our counselors to ride with. So there's a fresh officer who wants to do that work every shift, which is kind of how we design it now. We have 4 officers per shift. They kind of rotate who's doing the primary mental health calls that day, and the clinician rides with them. So I do want a lot more officers trained, but I want, changing the culture of the police department to know and monitor what officers are good and what officers need to be going on those calls that day is part of the process that we are growing together.
Okay.
And
Thank you. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add the importance of having officers who really want to do this type of work. That is what, Michael and the leadership of Metro PD really looked for in this pilot project, because you have to have the passion for doing this type of work. And thankfully, I believe, having volunteer officers versus mandating with all officers, that's one of the pros. There's certainly benefits to training all of Metro PD, and that may be the direction we go down. But right now, we really want those officers who have the heart for doing this and the passion for doing this.
Thank you so much for your time. And as you can tell, there's quite a bit of interest around this from various commissioners, and I myself am a master's level practitioner. And so the questions I asked, and particularly to risk, are assessed differently on both sides because we operate in that daily. So again, we thank you for your time to come and share with us, and hopefully it won't be the last.
Thank you.
Next, we will have the Reverend Ingrid Mcintyre from the village at Glencliff. And
You put the special fund thing up during legal aid, but you can put the village one up there for me. Was that you? Was that you? It's village@glencliff.org. Village@glencliff.org. Thank you. I thought that looked
excuse me,
nice.
just 1 minute before you get started. I just need to clear something up here real quick. Melanie, you gave me a real mean mug, and so I'm just telling you that. So go ahead. I was afraid when you looked at me.
She was trying to keep you in the bumpers.
I'm terrified.
Thank you all for having me. My name is Ingrid Mcintyre, and I am a clergy person in the United Methodist Church. There we are. And also a co-founder of Open Table Nashville in 2010 and the founder of the Village at Glencliff. Here this year, I currently have 2.5 jobs, and so my presentation is not quite as polished as everyone else's, but want to thank all of my colleagues who have spoken before. Really appreciate their work because it takes a village, you guys. None of us can do this alone. And so I'm really thankful for everyone who spoke. I do want to mention that one of the things that no one has talked about, because a lot of the things I'm going to talk about, everyone else has. 2 things. One is the accessibility that folks have, right? The accessibility to services that we've been talking about that help with harm reduction, et cetera. What is that accessibility for folks? And what is the level, like the grade level of the paperwork that they have to go through every day, right? Is it a master's level, reading material to fill out a form to make sure that XYZ is happening? When we started Open Table Nashville, there were 4 of us and we had 6 master's degrees, and it took us 3 years to learn how to efficiently navigate the social services system. And so I would say that part of the violence and the policing that we are talking about, if we are talking about harm reduction and is how do folks access these resources in a way that does not encourage them not to access the resources, right? And then the other piece that I would talk about is capacity. I super love Mental Health Co-op, and we work with them a lot with Tracy Pokovich. She's one of my favorites. Been working with her for about 12 years. But I also know that groups like even, Legal Aid or Mental Health Co-op or whoever it is, what is the capacity? the need in Nashville is so great that when there are outreach workers who have, and I mean, I'm speaking from a specific people without housing standpoint, right? So when when we have outreach workers whose caseloads are like 50 people, that's insane. We can say that we provide all of these great services, but nobody is getting the care that they need, right? When you've got 50 people as your caseload. So I would say increasing capacity and paying attention to accessibility are two things when we talk about housing or when we talk about violence reduction, harm reduction, et cetera. We really need to think about those things, about how, like, you know, Legal Aid Society, I know it's not, but it could be one person, right? Like, that's not enough to do all of these programs. And so making sure that each of these programs is funded well, and that we're respecting the work that is being done, which doesn't happen. As you know, social workers, pastors who, outreach workers get paid not enough to live in Davidson County, right? And then on top of that, they've got 50 people in their caseload. So that is not helpful to the system, and I don't want that to be lost on us today. So there's those little notes. And mine is a little more bulleted than everyone else's. What public safety means to me, or means to the folks that I've been working with, I think for the past 12 or 13 years, is better protection of dignity and humanity. It is prioritizing addiction and mental health connections for and with them. It is an effective housing and social services support system. And it is, like Travis said, building a healthy community. Some of the policies and practices that I suggest specifically for, again, this is all specific to the homeless community for me, is to empower the Metro Homeless Impact Division. That division has not been empowered. They are doing incredible work, and they are not being given the appropriate power to do their work, because I think, sorry, it would be helpful for me to say that housing is a huge piece to this puzzle, right? Housing is a huge piece. We have folks, I can't remember who said it, that I open up my emails every morning and I get the docket from the night before, right? Who is on there? Because sometimes I'm looking for someone that I need because their Social Security has come in or their housing voucher has come up. And when we can't find that person, half the time they're on that list. They're on a list of people who have been arrested for probably quality of life ordinances, like sitting on the sidewalk for too long or sleeping in a park or any of those various, to me, not very practical things that people are getting arrested for. And so with housing being, for me, the biggest piece, empowering the Metro Homeless Impact Division and the Planning Council. So we have a Planning Council for the Metro Homeless Impact Division that is, I can say right now, never asked about their professional advice on policies that the city makes. I don't know if this is a policy or if it's more of a culture shift, but recognizing that these are not personal failures and that they are more of systemic and societal problems, right? People feel so much shame, and that shame brings not a lot of healthy behaviors along with it. Again, things that other people have already said, sending out social workers or outreach workers instead of the police, getting rid of quality of life ordinances, a 3-digit mental health crisis number. So instead of 911, 788, right? So that is really helpful. Harm reduction, so not criminalizing people for, like I have a guy that I always buy cigarettes and booze for because he needs it. Like he can't talk to me and have a conversation. He's an alcoholic, right? And so every time I meet with him to work on his paperwork, I bring him a pint, right, and a pack of cigs, because I know that he and I are going to be able to have a more functional conversation. And hopefully he will be able to get help. But again, right now, trying to get somebody into a drug rehab program in Nashville is not super successful usually. Also, a lot of communities have ACT teams, which are assertive community treatment, and it's for mental health. I brought this. SAMHSA is has a lot of really good articles on policing. Sorry, my time is up. I'll stop. But I'm going to leave this with Mel, and then I can also send her, if she'll remind me, the link for it so that you can all just have a digital copy of that. But it's a 31-page document on addressing mental health, homelessness, and addiction, right? Without policing. So those are really helpful. And then my last thing would be systems building instead of whack-a-mole. Our city thinks it's real fun to like clear encampments and tell people they can't live somewhere without offering another alternative, right? And they might say the mission or they might say room in the inn, but if everyone took advantage of those things, that would be impossible. They could never fit the capacity. Not to mention that if we are doing harm reduction, these are not the places that some folks want to be, right? And that's not to like shame anyone. We all have, like, I don't want to live in certain places, right? And so just making sure that we're recognizing people's dignity and humanity. I have tons of things, but that's it for now. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions from the?
Mine's quick. So in our last housing hearing that we had 2 months ago, one of the things that we heard in our previous hearing was about the antiquated technology that the city uses and how it's such a hindrance. So I guess my question to you is, have you experienced anything similar? And, how, if the city were to update its technology so that it was a little more accessible, it's easier to find people, how that would help you improve doing what you do?
Yeah, so one of them is investing in the Metro Homeless Impact Division because they are systems builders and that is their job. So a lot of people think maybe that that those folks do outreach. They don't. When I first started working in homelessness in Nashville, there were 3 people in that office. There are 24 people doing systems building in that office, and we really need to support them. And like when they make budget requests, we should fill those budget requests, right? So that is one of the ways. One of the biggest ways, though, is when people apply for housing in Nashville, whether that be like public housing or low-income housing, they have to fill out like 25,000 applications, right? And each of those, if it's not public housing, costs something. And so if we could have a centralized housing application, for sure we can do that with our government housing, right? Like that is a no-brainer. How many people are reading applications day after day after day after day, right? Instead of just receiving them, they could receive one application instead of somebody applying for 20 different government housing properties, which is what you have to do now, which is insane. They could just do one application and be able to get housed when they're, when their number comes up, which is quite long, but at least it would help the process, I think. Help the frustration of the process, right?
Thank you. I think Abafazo was next, and then you, Commissioner Vennick, and then we're gonna move on because Mel is giving me the evil eye. Mel, you gotta stop looking at me like that because I'm not scared.
I'm not scared.
We're all culpable. We're all culpable in this. Thank you so much for coming and summarizing the remaining issues that haven't been mentioned. So one of the things you talked about is, and you kind of said under your breath, because I think of frustration largely, but if someone is needing psychiatric care, like a bed or a spot, it's just, you're like, or I think that's what you're talking about. Maybe it was maybe substance abuse. It was like futile to even try. Okay, so what's the dream for that? A 50-unit building? What is it? What when you think of that, what is it?
Well, that's not something that I spend very much time thinking about.
Okay.
But I would say again, just capacity building across the board, right? So not even just like rehabilitation spaces, but spaces, more funding for outreach workers for mental health co-op. And folks that are on the street, right? More funding for other nonprofits that have folks on the street, or folks who are doing like therapy work. So many of our folks have trauma, and they can't even address the trauma because that's not a resource that's necessarily readily available to them, right? And part of that is the population of folks that we're working with. It's really hard once you get somebody to say, like, yeah, I'll go into whatever program it is. If it's not available right then, forget about it, right? Because they don't live in a home, right? Like, where am I going to find them? Maybe I will. Maybe they'll be, with it enough to take them into the program in 3 months. They might be dead, right? We've had plenty of people who we finally got their voucher after 32 months or whatever, right? And they die the week before we can move them in. So I think that my prescription would just be like capacity building around all social services, right? There's nothing that we've got right yet. When we had this week, we had someone who broke into a church for food. And of course, they were criminalized for that, right? They didn't have food, and that's why they did something that they probably wouldn't have done before. So we're clearly missing some of the resources that are needed in our system. We would also have fewer evictions, right, if people weren't criminalized for things that seem sort of ridiculous to the rest of us. So I hope that's a little bit helpful, but I would just say capacity building is huge and a big need.
Commissioner Vennick.
Short. Thank you for being here today. What would it take to reimagine the village approach to addressing homelessness in Nashville?
Yeah, I think that's what, I was telling somebody today that I wish that we had villages all over our town, because we've been open since July 19th and started moving people in August. And we've seen people who haven't walked start walking again. And we've seen people who haven't been able to go to the doctor because of their substance abuse go to the doctor 4 times now, right? And actually be able to get treated. And we've seen people who, have not wanted to engage now that they have their own space. They've started to engage. If you'll scroll down just a little bit on the screen, if you don't mind. Sorry, what's her name? Barbara. Hey, Barbara. Oh, yeah, perfect. So the village are these homes, right? And they're 200 square feet for one person, which is what codes requires for a home. I was actually in this room in a trial one time about these homes. And then there's some that are for 2 people, and it's a medical respite space. And people come here after they are in the hospital, and instead of getting discharged to the streets, they get discharged here. But I don't think it has to be just medical respite, right? I think it's what everyone needs. So many people, even friends from LA and New York have been like, we would live in these spaces, right? Because they're better than what we're living in right now. And so I think when people have their own space, and as you can tell, they're separate. They don't share a wall with anyone. That's not saying that I don't think motels work, but this is the time, and somebody may not ever have a space like this ever again. They're always gonna share a wall, which again can disturb your mental health, right? Depending on what it is. So yeah, Erwin, it would take, so ours is on church property. And so I think it would take a lot of churches, probably, because that is a way that you can get through zoning. It would take a lot of funding. I mean, so this project has cost $1.5 million so far, and that was for 12 homes, and then the site work for 10 more homes. So it's really not that expensive, especially when you consider what we have been talking about spending on machinery to bulldoze encampments. So this could happen in lots of spaces. Yeah, and I think some permanent and some, you know, transitional, depending on people's needs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend McIntyre.
Yes, thanks for asking me. Appreciate you all.
Next, we'll have Cecilia Prado with Workers' Dignity.
Hi, y'all. I have some slides. Work for Google Slides. Yeah, your Google Slides, right? Yeah. All right. So I kept the title of this presentation very short and simple, which is like Operation Kills. Hi, I am Cecilia Prado. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a director at Workers' Dignity. We're a worker center that's been in Nashville since 2010. And we are very much worker-led. We are led by a board composed of democratically elected low-wage workers, such as construction workers, cleaning workers. We organize across issues in the workplace, industry, but we also organize in the community and have supported 2 tenant unions here in Nashville, in East Nashville and South Nashville, because we believe that workers are whole people and we should address all issues that affect the working class. So to start, I just want to say that Tennessee has the worst labor laws in the country. We are a right-to-work state, and at will state, there's not really economic security among working class people. Everybody's afraid of losing their jobs if they stand up for better standards in the workplace. In addition, we have only 34 healthy and safe inspectors for all 3 million workers in Tennessee. So workplaces are not getting inspected and workers are dying. And there's minimum consequences for bad actors. And now I spend most of my time organizing construction workers in Nashville. So what happens when you have a booming city with 70 to 100 people moving here every day, a lot of people profiting off the housing market and development and gentrification, and you have the worst labor laws in the country? You have death. You have construction sites becoming COVID clusters. We have 16-year-olds dying on construction sites. We have 12-year-olds working in many construction sites here in Nashville. And they're dying. They're not getting workers' compensation benefits. They're getting intimidated by their bosses. They're getting raped by their bosses. Lots. Why? Why is this happening? Because we have a very strong and organized opposition. One of the most powerful chambers of commerce, and we have organizations like the Associated Builders are contractors that are deregulating the construction market, and they're basically removing the power of local agencies to actually enforce or inspect or have any type of agency over construction sites. We have a construction committee composed of directly affected workers, and here you have Gustavo Ramirez, the father of Gustavo, who was a 16-year-old who died. Next to him, there's another father who lost somebody in construction, a son as well. And we have many stories like that, and we hear all kinds of stories. We have a space called Worker Nights, where any worker with an issue comes and learns how to solve their own problems. And we have all kinds of things. We have wage theft. We have many workers' compensation cases because it's a broken system. Workers are no longer able to get lawyers to actually defend them in case. The lack of access to healthcare actually plays a role. And just the whole way that the system is designed is preventing workers from accessing quality healthcare when they get hurt in the workplace. And we are the most dangerous city in the whole South for construction workers. So We see them all the time. Next step. Oh, I think this works actually. One issue that is very much concerning is the lack of language justice, right? And lack of cultural competence in all kinds of public spaces, systems, courts, you name it. For example, in the Tennessee Workers' Compensation's office, there's only one ombudsman that speaks Spanish in the whole state, 2 mediators that speak Spanish in the whole state, and there's nothing else for any other kinds of languages. In addition, the court interpreters don't need to be certified interpreters. They're often over the phone. And if you see through a workers' compensation court where the worker doesn't have a lawyer and they don't have access to language justice, it's honestly frightening. It's a very dehumanizing experience to have. You also have a very significant portion of Latin American folks that actually are not really Latinx. They are not Spanish speaking. They speak indigenous languages. Like, for example, Guatemala is a majority indigenous country, and folks are just classifying them as Spanish speakers, which is not only, it's a violation of international law that we are having here every day, but it also leads to some horrific stories, including like people getting separated from their children. You know, we have a member who hasn't seen her children in a whole year, and because of the lack of access to language justice in treating her as a Spanish speaker, she hasn't been able to return to her daughters, and they keep bringing up all these wild hypotheses, including that she stole her daughters, which is not true. Including zoning changes, eviction notices, they're often never in languages besides English. We helped develop 2 successful tenant unions in South and East Nashville, and one was at Mosaic Apartments. 89 families almost illegally evicted from Mosaic Apartments, and a long history of abuse and neglect from management. We're talking feces, rats, collapsed ceilings, kids, you know, just playing with rats, kids falling into manholes, and just years of neglect, and a history of management collaborating with law enforcement to evict people, including collaborating with ICE as well. And in 2010, they collaborated, they did an ICE raid at the apartment complexes to try to get rid of many tenants and gentrify it. We also have the WC mobile home community, which is now a growing trend of Dickerson Pike or District 5, especially, you know, now speeding up the process with the Oracle project. Folks are getting displaced, and, you know, mobile homes are not really considered fixtures on the land or real homes, and so folks are about to lose everything because they don't have rights to compensation, and, you know, mobile homes are either impossible or really expensive to move. And, you know, here we have pictures of kids that are speaking in front of Metro Council, and we have, you know, all folks that have to spend all their retirement savings to find a new home to live. Folks that have to pick between eye surgery and living. And we also have landlords such as owner Tony Claus that are abusing their residents, including like these 10 families that got deceived into moving to a plot without access to water or electricity for months. And nothing is happening to this owner that is still able to sell his land and, you know, destroy people's lives. We are also talking to other folks. As I mentioned, this is a growing trend. And most important, the way that we talk about gentrification and we talk about housing is also just talking as if we're all businesses, we're all a bunch of buildings, right? But one important thing that developers are destroying, and, you know, the same developers that we keep giving incentives to, is our communities. Nobody talks why Mosaic apartment residents, they wanted to stay there, not just because it was the location, but also the people, right? It was not just something that you can solve by just moving somebody to a different house. When they're living next to their family and their neighbors and their schools and the businesses that they shop at, and, you know, that's access to childcare. You know, they share childcare responsibilities across the friends. And, you know, this whole thing that happened at Mosaic Apartments destroyed the community for good. And the whole narrative around the trailers at Dickerson is also acting as if people are not communities, and if losing a community is not something that is a tragedy, when in fact is an attack on the working class, because it's a survival strategy for people that don't have a lot of money. If you come from a collectivist culture, I mean, that's your survival mechanism. That's what keeps you alive. And by developers coming in and acting as if it's okay to destroy it or intentionally destroy it, that's war. So some key takeaways: the excessive power that corporations have in the city is killing people and workers literally. The agencies that are supposed to protect workers are underfunded and often broken, you know. The lack of access to language justice is leading to a significant number of human rights abuses, and gentrification is also like leading to people losing their communities, which is a health and public safety concern. And here are some images of some of the folks that we've been working with, including you have a child at Mosaic Apartments. You know, the kids like really need a place to play and safe areas to play, but we don't really look into, you know, how landlords neglect to working class people is also a public health concern. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Prado. Any questions from any commissioners? Yes, Mr. Dash.
Thanks so much for being here, and thanks for all your work. I have a quick question. So right now, if we reached out to MNPD and we asked, do you all collaborate with ICE? I think that the answer would be, they would tell us no. And so I guess in your opinion, my question is, would you agree that that is true right now in 2021?
I think that what we know, and I can only say what I have seen, at Mosaic Apartments, we know that management uses the police to intimidate people. I mean, I got myself the cops called on me for trying to support a tenant. They were trying to evict 89 families over the phone with a 3-day notice. They told them that some government inspection had deemed their apartments uninhabitable, which wasn't true. So the day that the folks found out, I went to the office and we tried to get a copy of the report that is supposedly like leading to their eviction, right? So the manager just calls the cops on us. And that was not the first time that we saw that. We saw them use the cops several times to the point that, you know, we had to call Metro Council and they had to call Metro Police and address that. In addition, every single time, folks at Mosaic Apartments were extremely concerned over their safety. One time again, they asked them if they needed more police to feel safer, and they said no, because they remember. So I do not know if police is collaborating with ICE right now, but I do know that there is a collective memory among people, and when they see police and you're an immigrant, you also think of ICE, because obviously, right? So many folks at Mosaic Apartments, they remember like being like restrained by the cops. They remember a lot of these things. Some of them actually have status because of the human rights abuses that the police and ICE inflicted on them in 2010. And, you know, so I just know that we live in a system that does not favor poor people, and the police is enforcing such system that is based on colonialism and capitalism, and that doesn't end up working out for working class people.
And then I think the other question that I have is just talking about the trauma and damage that happens when, you know, if you could kind of expand a little bit on the indigenous communities when they're classified as Spanish speakers, they, you know, Spanish interpreters run and they speak a completely different language, and just talking a little bit about the isolation that is sometimes felt or just kind of the damage that you've seen in doing your work.
When folks first arrive here, we have seen a lot of people becoming, you know, having suicidal thoughts. This is, for example, the case with the mother who has the girls in state custody. She's being punished for talking to her girls in Achi because they don't have an Achi interpreter that can surveil the conversations that they have over Zoom with the girls, right? And she is punished by like speaking the native language that she uses. She doesn't speak good Spanish. She doesn't really speak good Spanish, but she hasn't been able to talk in her own language with her girls. And just the lack of access to like language justice and interpretation has led to miscommunications, right? To the point that when you combine the miscommunication with the racism that they're experiencing, you know, that is leading to an indigenous mother losing her girls for a year and the girls being given to white parents. And we also are seeing that, like, you know, indigenous folks are hired constantly at, for example, construction sites where the work is very dangerous, you know. For example, Nashville is currently a hotspot of Maya Quechua people, which are an indigenous community from northern Guatemala. They're being destroyed, their land is being destroyed by mining, palm oil, and mining companies. So with that and like the environmental destruction that that has, you know, many folks are coming in, including a large influx of minors that are coming, and you know, many of these young people, like, they want to work, and they're made to assimilate to American culture to be able to stay in this country, which is extremely traumatic for the families. In addition to them being, to the older folks getting exploited at work because it's easier, because they don't speak Spanish, because they don't know the place. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just one real quickly. Is there any resource that the Metro government has that actually knows the different indigenous languages that are even spoken? I mean, is there a report out there, or is there a list out there that we would, if we were to fund translators?
For the government, I would suggest the Mayan League, which is an organization based in Washington, D.C. that we work closely with, and then another one in California called Cielo.
Now, my question to you is, do we know of all does Metro government know of the languages that would need for translation? If we're to
I do not know. What I do know is that Metro often categorizes all people that come from Latin America as Latinx, which is not true.
Okay.
And it's violation of international law at not actually recognizing people as, you know, their distinct nations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Prado.
Thank you.
Sorry, we've run a little late, Dr. Phillips. Thank you so much for staying. And everybody else, too.
Yes, thank everyone for staying, but in my line of work, they often save the best speaker for last.
I don't know if that's true in this instance. All the things I was going to say, a lot of them have already been said, but that's good. I can maybe finish early. Yeah, I wanted to start off, I was going to talk about the hierarchy of needs, that we have obviously thousands of people whose basic needs aren't being met in Nashville. And we've got hundreds of thousands of people whose basic needs are at threat from economic insecurity, from unemployment, and other physical stressors. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I know most about, which would be more affordable housing and wages and poverty, and I will focus on that. So one of the questions was, what is public safety? And affordable housing, I think, promotes stability. And things that promote stability promote public safety. When people are of a fear of losing their houses, or being displaced to communities that we just heard about, where they don't have access to those basic needs like health care or child care because they're new in the community, that creates stresses throughout the community. Likewise, livable wages also promotes stability. And when we're talking about livable wages, there can be debate about what that is. Is it $15 an hour? Is it $20 an hour? I'm not sure, but there's literature on that in terms of trying to figure that out. Metro Nashville, or Nashville and the Chamber, has been really good at creating jobs that pay over $100,000 a year. And there are people who benefit from that, and they move here for those opportunities. It's been less successful in creating ladders of opportunity for people who lack the education to access those high-paying, white-collar type jobs and high-tech jobs. I also think that affordable and accessible health services promotes public safety. And inasmuch as communities suffer from a lack of access to high-quality health care, that creates instability and, again, more opportunities for bad things to happen. Highly effective schools, and I'll speak about that in just a moment, promote skills development and the types of opportunities that can lead to future success, that can build buy-in from people throughout the community. And also affordable child care. I don't know if that's been mentioned yet, But it also has to be accessible and it has to be high quality that prepares children for kindergarten and K-12. And public transportation that can take people and move people from areas of need to areas of opportunity. And that becomes more difficult in a growing regional economy where a lot of potentially, I don't want to say high paying, but sustainable jobs in Amazon and places like that. They're building a lot of their larger facilities out in the counties without access to public transportation. Wilson County is one of those counties, and they will continue to grow over time. So one of the other questions was, what policies and practices should be made to move towards public safety that's not just law enforcement based? And there's some expertise in this room on your board and with your director on the concept of an equity lens, that we need in Metro government an equity lens that forces us to look at public decisions through a lens, how does this affect the most disadvantaged groups in society? And if we could do that, I think that would make a major step. It also builds trust. I haven't done a lot of work in criminal justice, but prior to coming here to Nashville at Tennessee State, I did work in a research institute and ran that in Chattanooga, and we did a comprehensive gang study where we went into prisons and interviewed youth, and we worked with the DA's office and produced a 100-and-something page report. And one of the things that struck me was the biggest problem facing Chattanooga at that time, at least when it came to criminal justice, and I would assume it's the same here, is the complete lack of trust in certain communities for law enforcement, for local government, who has promised time and time again that we're going to change things and this time it's going to be different, that people don't buy in. So starting to change that narrative by looking at things through an equity lens, for instance, might be part of rebuilding that trust. Other programs, and I mentioned education. Obviously, there's a lot of things that could be done in that regard. We have finite funds, but the city of Chattanooga is also looking at reinstituting traditional vocational training for high school students. Not traditional in the sense that it's all just kind of manual labor, but modernized for a technological workforce that provides pathways to students to access while they're in school to start making money through an apprenticeship program. And then you graduate, you don't have to wait another 4 or 5, 6 years, go into $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in debt for a college degree that might start you off making $30,000 a year. Things that are real and tangible to people who are living in desperate situations. I think that's very important. It's also when we talk about the wage, and I know, let's say it is $15 an hour. In a community where the median rent is $1,500 a month, that's not sustainable. That derails good efforts to create quality jobs and to plug people into a system of building wealth and equity. That brings in housing affordability, not just rental. But one of the things that's happened over the last 10 years is home ownership rates for African Americans and whites have gone down throughout the region. Historically, that's been the biggest source of intergenerational wealth and providing that pathway to middle class and upper middle class. That's being eroded by a number of factors that I don't have time to get into, but it's something that needs to be considered in terms of moving us forward. I don't want to criticize the Barnes Fund. I think 10 million here, 20 million there is very good, but I've seen studies that suggest we already have a deficit